We often look at the civilization of ancient Egypt and see a culture obsessed with permanence. The Great Pyramids, the mummified bodies, the statues carved from the hardest diorite stone, everything was designed to last forever. We assume they were a people of the light, confident in their place in the universe. But this obsession with eternity was not born out of confidence. It was born out of a desperate, paralyzing fear. The Egyptians believed that their world was a tiny, fragile bubble of order floating in an infinite, dark ocean of chaos. And deep within that ocean, something was moving. Something that hated the light. Tonight, we begin our descent into the shadows of the Nile to uncover the monsters that terrified the gods themselves. We start with the ultimate enemy, the creature that existed before time and will exist after it ends. Apep, the Lord of Chaos. Apep was not merely a god of evil. He was the antithesis of existence. In the intricate theology of Egypt, the creator god Ra brought the world into being by speaking it into existence, separating order from the void. Apep was the void fighting back. He was the screeching silence that wanted to unmake creation, to drag the universe back into the dark waters of known existence. He is depicted as a colossal serpent, reportedly over 16 yards long, with coils made of flint and a roar that shook the underworld. But the true horror of Apep wasn't just his size, it was his persistence. Every night, the sun god Ra had to travel through the Duat, the realm of the dead, to be reborn in the east. And every single night, without fail, Apep was there, waiting for him in the 10th region of the night. This wasn't a war that could be won once and for all. It was an eternal stalemate. The Egyptians lived with the terrifying psychological burden that the sun might not rise tomorrow. If Ra failed just once, if his solar barge was swallowed by the serpent, time itself would shatter and humanity would vanish into the dark. The battles were described as psychic and visceral. Apep possessed a hypnotic gaze that could paralyze the gods, locking their minds in terror. Even Ra, the king of gods, was susceptible to this stare. He needed the help of other deities, particularly the god Set, to break the enchantment and spear the serpent. This reflects a profound human truth acknowledged by the ancients, that chaos is hypnotic. Destruction is seductive. It is easier to destroy than to create, and the pull of the void is always there, waiting for a moment of weakness to combat these. In the modern world, our fears of the afterlife are often shaped by concepts of fire and brimstone. We fear eternal punishment, a place of suffering where we pay for our sins forever. But the ancient Egyptians had a different fear, one that is perhaps more chilling to the rational mind. They did not fear pain. They feared oblivion. They feared the absolute erasure of the self. To an Egyptian, the worst thing that could happen wasn't going to hell. It was simply ceasing to exist, and the agent of this terrifying nothingness was a creature named Ammit. Ammit is known by many titles: the devourer of the dead, the eater of hearts, the great of death. She is a visual nightmare, a chimera composed of the 3 deadliest manitors known to the people of the Nile. She possessed the head of a crocodile, the 4 quarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This was not a random assortment of parts. To the ancients, these animals represented the apex of danger in the water and on land. By combining them, the Egyptian theologians created a symbol of inescapable termination. Unlike other monsters that roamed the wild deserts or the dark waters of the underworld, Ammit was civilized. She lived in the most sacred place imaginable, the Hall of Truth. She sat silently beside the scales of Met, waiting for the judgment of Osiris. When a person died, their soul was brought into this hall, and their heart's seat of memory and emotion was placed on a golden scale. On the other side of the scale sat the feather of truth. If the person had lived a good life, the heart would balance with the feather, and they would pass on to the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. But if the heart was heavy weighted down by sin, guilt, greed, or cruelty, the scale would tip, and in that moment of silence, Ammit would move. She did not torture the soul. She simply ate the heart. In an instant, the essence of the person was digested. There was no ghost left to haunt the living, no spirit to journey to the stars. The individual was uncreated. This was the second death, the finality that kept the pharaohs and peasants alike in line. Ammit represents the ultimate anxiety of the human condition. The fear that our lives ultimately mean nothing. She is the garbage disposal of the cosmos, the creature that cleans up the mistakes of creation. There is something profoundly disturbing about her passivity. She doesn't hunt you. She waits for you. She is the inevitable consequence of a wasted life. In the eyes of Ammit, there is no mercy, no bargaining, and no second chances. There is only the hungry silence of the void. When we think of the Egyptian pantheon, we think of noble figures like Osiris, the green-skinned judge, or Isis, the mother goddess of magic. We think of a structured religion based on harmony. But look deeper into the texts of the Pyramid Age, and you will find deities that blur the line between divinity and monstrosity. There are gods who performed tasks so gruesome that they were worshipped with trembling hands. The most infamous of these is Shezmu, the Lord of Blood. Shezmu is a study in horrific duality. On the surface, he was a minor god of precious oils, perfumes, and wine. He was associated with the festive nature of the harvest and the preservation of the body through ointments. But the Egyptians understood that the technology of the wine fruit to extract its essence could be applied to darker materials. And so, in the underworld, Shezmu was not pressing grapes. He was pressing the heads of sinners. He is depicted as a lion-headed man, his mane matted with gore, standing over a massive press. The texts describe him as the slaughterer of souls and the butcher of Osiris. Role was to take the wicked, those who had failed the judgment or offended the gods, and throw them into his machine. He would jump in and trample them underfoot, just as a winemaker tramples grapes, crushing their skulls to extract their blood. But this was not just mindless violence. It was a dark ritual. The blood collected by Shezmu was not discarded. It was served as a revitalizing wine to the righteous dead and even to the pharaohs. The cannibal hymn from the Old Kingdom suggests that the king would devour the gods and drink their magic to become all. Shezmu was the chef who prepared this macabre meal. He transformed the suffering of the wicked into sustenance for the holy. This reveals a brutal pragmatism in the ancient mindset. Justice was not just about punishing the bad, it was about repurposing them. The destruction of the enemy provided fuel for the victor. Shezmu represents the state-sanctioned violence that upholds civilization. He is the executioner who does the dirty work so the king can remain clean. He smells of the finest perfumes, masking the scent of the slaughterhouse that he operates in the dark. He is the reminder that in the ancient world, power was often distilled from the blood of those who fell beneath the wheel. The Nile Delta was a landscape of beauty, but it was also a place of primal danger. While lions and crocodiles were feared for their strength, there was another animal that the Egyptians respected for its sheer, unpredictable aggression. The baboon. We often associate baboons with Thoth, the god of wisdom, depicting them as calm scribes. But there was another baboon god, one who represented the animal in its rawest, most violent form. His name was Babi, the bull of the baboons. Babi was not a god of wisdom. He was a god of dominance. He embodied the alpha male instinct, the unbridled testosterone that drives the animal kingdom. In the wild, baboons are incredibly vicious, capable of tearing predators apart with their teeth. Babi was this fury deified. The ancient texts describe him as living on the entrails of the wicked, tearing them open with the savagery of a wild beast. He was a creature of blood and lust, completely devoid of the civilizing influence of Mat. What makes Babi particularly terrifying to the modern sensibility is his association with sexual violence as a weapon of power. He was the god of virility, but in its most dominating and destructive aspect. The hieroglyphs sometimes depict him with an erect phallus, which was said to be the bolt on the doors of heaven, or even the mast of the ferry to the afterlife. This imagery suggests that the pathway to the divine was guarded by raw, aggressive masculinity. He was said to control the lake of fire in the underworld, a place of destruction for the enemies of Ra. Yet, despite his horrific nature, the Egyptians prayed to him. They didn't pray out of love. They prayed for protection. They believed that if they could earn Babi's favor, he would turn his aggression outward against their enemies. He was the god dog of the soul, dangerous, rabid, and barely controlled. Babi serves as a mirror to our own evil. He represents the ID, the primal urges that civilization tries to suppress, but can never truly eliminate. He is the beast within the human psyche, The reminder that beneath our clothes and our laws, we are still primates capable of extreme violence. In the dark tunnels of the Do-It, wisdom wasn't enough to save you. Sometimes, you needed a monster to fight the monsters. To understand the deepest fears of ancient Egypt, we must go back before the pharaohs, before the writing of the hieroglyphs, to the misty era known as the pre-dynastic period. In this time, the rules of art and theology had not yet been set in stone. The imagination of the people ran wild, birthing creatures that defy biological classification. From this ancient time comes a monster that has no name in the texts, a creature known to archaeologists only by its description. Carved onto ancient cosmetic palettes like the famous Narmer palette, the serpent is a surreal nightmare. It possesses the muscular body of a leopard or a lioness, combined with the impossibly long, winding neck of a serpent. In these carvings, the necks of two serpents are often intertwined, creating a circle in the center, while human figures struggle to hold them back with ropes and leashes. Unlike the later gods who had human bodies and animal heads, the serpent is purely beast. It represents the unnatural nature. It is the embodiment of the chaotic wilderness that surrounded the early settlements of the Nile. The image of men leashing these beasts is profound. It symbolizes the dawn of civilization itself, an attempt of humanity to bind the chaotic forces of nature and bring them under control. The intertwined necks likely symbolize the violent unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, a harmony forged through the conquest of wild, opposing forces. Some historians speculate that the serpent might be a cultural memory of megafauna that had gone extinct, or perhaps a misinterpretation of giraffe fossils. But mythologically, they served a more important purpose. They were the monsters of the frontier. They prowled the edges of the map in the deep deserts where the king's law did not reach. They remind us that nature is not a benevolent garden created for our comfort. It is a wild, predatory thing that we have barely managed to tame. The serpent is the storm, the flood, and the plague, the forces that can snap their leashes at any moment and devour the order we have built. They are the ancient, silent warning carved in stone. Do not mistake the quiet for safety. The beast is merely waiting. We have spoken of the generals of the Dark Army, the great singular monsters like Apep and Ammit. But war is not fought by generals alone. It is fought by the infantry. In the endless night of the Egyptian underworld, the sun god Ra faced not just one enemy, but a swarm. These are the Sabao, the fiends of darkness, the legion of the faceless. The Subo are difficult to visualize because they are shapeshifters. They are the collective manifestation of rebellion. They appear as crocodiles, as serpents, as shadows, or as twisted humanoids. They are the minions of chaos who rise from the waters of the abyss every night to attack the solar barge. If Apep is the nuclear bomb, the Sabao are the radiation pervasive, invisible, and everywhere. The horror of the Sabao lies in their numbers. They represent the concept of the many. In Egyptian mythology, knowing a demon's name gave you power over it. But how do you fight an enemy that has no name, no identity, and no end? They are the swarm that tries to beach the solar boat, to entangle its oars, to distract the guardians. They represent the relentless friction of life. They are the thousand small problems that wear down a great man, the erosion that crumbles a mountain, the locusts that eat the crop. In the Book of the Dead, the deceased are armed with spells specifically designed to ward off the Sabao. The texts speak of them trying to eat the flesh of the soul, to nip at the heels of the dead as they journey toward judgment. They are the scavengers of the spirit world. The Sabao teach us a terrifying lesson about the nature of evil. Evil is not always a grand, dramatic confrontation with a dragon. Sometimes it is just a relentless, grinding force. It is the exhaustion of fighting the same battles every day. Ra conquers them tonight, but they will be back tomorrow, and the night after that, forever. They are the proof that the war against darkness is not a single event, but an eternal condition of existence. When we look at the great Sphinx of Giza today, we see a marvel of engineering, a silent guardian watching over the pyramids. We see a tourist attraction, but if we strip away the modern context and look at the Sphinx through the eyes of the ancients, we see something far more dangerous. To the Egyptians, the Sphinx, or the Shezmu, meaning living image, was not a passive statue. It was a solar predator. The Egyptian Sphinx is a creature with the body of a lion and the head of a king or a god. It combines the raw, physical dominance of the apex predator with the supreme intelligence and authority of the divine ruler. While the later Greek Sphinx was a female monster who strangled travelers who couldn't solve her riddles, the Egyptian Sphinx was a male guardian of immense power, often associated with the horizon, the Akhet, where the sun rises and sets. But do not mistake a guardian for a pet. In the dream stele of Thutmose IV, the Sphinx speaks. It demands service. It promises the throne of Egypt in exchange for clearing the sand from its paws. This story reveals that the Sphinx was viewed as a sentient, powerful entity that could bestow kingship or destroy it. It was a creature of the desert, dwelling in the burning silence where humans could not survive. Variations of the Sphinx, like the griffin with the head of a falcon or the Hyaraka Sphinx, roamed the mythological landscape as protectors of sacred spaces, but protection implies a threat. To approach a Sphinx was to approach the divine presence, and the divine was dangerous. It was a creature that could crush a man with a single paw without malice, simply because it was greater than him. The Sphinx represents the terrifying indifference of the cosmos. It sits in the sand, unmoving, unblinking, watching empires rise and fall, watching kings live and die. It is a monster because it is beyond our comprehension and control. It is the living rock, the geological time that mocks our brief human lifespans. It does not hate us. It simply outlasts us. It is the silent riddle of death that no one has ever truly solved. We have journeyed through the black waters of the Duat. We have stood before the serpent of chaos, watched the eater of hearts wait in the silence, and seen the blood-red wine of the press. We have catalogued the nightmares of one of the greatest civilizations in human history. But a question remains. Why? Why did the ancient Egyptians, a people who loved life, who celebrated with beer and music, who built monuments to the sun, fill their spiritual world with such horrific monsters? The answer lies in the single most important concept of their philosophy. Mat is often translated as truth, justice, or order. But Mat is not a static state of being. It is an action. It is a force that must be actively maintained. You cannot understand the value of order unless you understand the terror of this or chaos. These monsters, Apep, Ammit, Bobby, the Saba, were not just scary stories to tell in the dark. They were necessary components of the universe. They defined the heroes. Wito Apep is just a traveler. With Apep, Ra is a warrior. Without Ammit, the moral life has no stakes. With Ammit, every action matters. The Egyptians understood a profound truth that we often forget. Order is not free. Civilization is not a guarantee. The sun does not rise by accident. It rises because a battle was won in the darkness. Every day is a victory against the void. These monsters taught the Egyptians that they had a role to play in the cosmos. By living a good life, by speaking the truth, by maintaining the temples, they were helping the gods hold back the tide of chaos. For us, thousands of years later, the names of the monsters have changed. We no longer fear giant snakes or crocodile hybrids. We fear entropy, nuclear war, environmental collapse, and the meaninglessness of existence. But the battle is exactly the same. We are all sailors on the solar barge, drifting through a dark and hostile ocean. The shadows are always there, waiting for the light to flicker. But as long as we keep sailing, as long as we keep fighting back the dark, the sun will rise again. The scrolls of Egypt are now sealed, but the library of human fear is vast, and the shadows are deepening. We have survived the Nile, but across the great green sea, a new age of monsters awaits. Hydras, Gorgons, and Titans who dared to challenge the heavens. If you wish to continue this descent into the darkness of history, click the subscribe button now. It is the only way to ensure you don't miss the boat when we set sail for ancient Greece. But before you go, I have one final question for you to answer in the comments. Of all the nightmares we faced, from the chaos of Apep to the silence of Ammit, which one would you be most frightened to meet in the dark? If you enjoyed the journey, leave a like. And if you are still hungry for more mysteries, click the video on your screen right now. Until we meet again, keep the lights on.